Mr. Aaron Ruff. All right. First, let me say what an honor and a privilege it is to address you this evening, and I greatly appreciate the opportunity. This is kind of weird because I'm talking out here, but this is really for you guys, so I'm going to try to look back and forth a little bit more. It's your graduation day! That cheer was just a really enthusiastic duh. Okay. The moment you guys have all been waiting for, at least since the beginning of your senior year, if not longer. Am I right? Okay. It has been filled with many lasts. The last football game, the last concert, the last yearbook signing session, and yet you are on the cusp of so many firsts. It may not all apply to each of you, but it could be your first venture out into the real world. Your first experience living away from home. Your first foray into college, training, career, or the military, and spoiler alert, tearjerker, the first time home isn't actually where you rest your head each night. It is truly an exciting time, and I feel it is my responsibility as the graduation speaker to equip you with a compass of sorts that will help guide your decisions and direct you as you go on in your endeavors. While I am sure many graduation speakers are more eloquent than I am, perhaps they will deliver their words of wisdom with greater impact or greater flourish, I want to give you these guiding words in authenticity in the hopes that you may apply them and that you will actually remember who your graduation speaker was and what they said a year from now. Here's the hoping. So, as you can see, for those of you who have programs, this is entitled, What Are You Doing With Your Life? Could I have the audience just repeat after me real quick? I want to make sure you have this in your back pocket for like the next couple years. What are you doing with your life?
What are you doing with your life?
Seniors, say it with me. What are you doing with your life? Good, that's close to saying it with me. This question seems so simple, and to be honest, maybe its meaning has become comical through the way our society seems to take the biggest philosophical questions and makes light of them. It seems like something you might hear someone say if they had just spilled ranch all over themselves as they were attempting to drive and eat/dip McNuggets at the same time. Or something a parent might say out loud for their own amusement as their toddler is rage-quitting life in the middle of Target. Regardless of its facetious uses, this question, when used at the right time and in the right way, can take you to new heights of efficiency, new heights of maturity, new heights of responsibility, and maybe even new heights of existence, as in, it could make you and those around you better people. If you're not quite convinced, let me attempt to convince you through some stories I want to tell, and how in each of these stories the question, what are you doing with your life, has served a different and extremely useful purpose. First, travel back in time to the dining room table of my family home, where the young Mr. Ruff is filling out paperwork to attend university in order to pursue his music education degree. At the table sits his dad, not his young Mr. Ruff, who is being ever so helpful in filling out this paperwork, but in a moment of intense seriousness, he poses this question. He says, "Young Mr. Ruff," he didn't say that, but, "are you sure you want to be a teacher? You know, they don't make that much money. And not as young Mrs. Ruff and I will not be able to help you much with college expenses. What are you doing with your life?" Now, don't confuse the intent of my dad. He meant well. He actually meant the absolute best. What are you doing with your life was asked out of love, out of concern, out of caring for my future, and out of wanting to make sure that I was making the best possible choice out there. And I am so very glad that I had a person in my life that was willing to ask me that question. And you need to be open to other people asking you the same when it comes to you out of their love for you. As for me, I already knew the answer to that question. I already knew it because I had asked that exact same question of myself a few years earlier. Let's go further back in time. to an even younger Mr. Ruff, who was part of as many extracurricular activities as he could cram into his schedule. Jazz choir, jazz band, concert band, drama production, soccer, youth group activities filled all of my free time. I loved these activities, but that wasn't the main reason my schedule was so jam-packed. I was involved in so many so that I wouldn't have to be at home in a situation that wasn't healthy or safe for me to be in. Being in that situation nearly destroyed me as a young man. It sent me to dark places. It made me question my value as a person. And it made me doubt if I could truly be successful at anything. But it was through these activities that I found I could be successful, and I realized that the educators and directors who were running these activities were all about giving others the opportunity to be successful in something, to find their worth in something. I wanted to be about that. I wanted to choose a career path that would allow me to do that for others. So I asked myself the question, what are you doing with your life? And the question prompted me to let go of the person I was sadly becoming into someone more positive, someone more compassionate, to become someone who is willing to lay down certain priorities in order to pick up others. So when my dad asked me, what are you doing with your life? I was confident of my answer. I said, yeah, Dad, I know exactly what I'm doing with my life. Fast forward. Well, not that fast forward. Okay, so fast forward to my college years, and over winter break, I decided to visit my best friend, whose name is McConkey, in Edinburgh. McConkey's from Northern Ireland, and he was studying architecture at the University of Edinburgh, Scotland. Edinburgh is a beautiful city where every street you find yourself on is downhill from the city center, which sits at the top of a hill, and a very majestic Edinburgh castle is sitting there. He took me along with another friend named Peter to a large grassy hilltop overlooking the city at what is the Scottish equivalent of a national park, and it's called Arthur's Seat. It's called that because that area of Great Britain is where a certain group of knights existed way back in the Dark Ages, who were the basis for the fairy tales of King Arthur and his Knights of the Round. In fact, there's a cathedral in Edinburgh that if you go to, there's a side room called the Order of the Thistle. And that room is supposedly the Knights of the Round. The knights who were part of that were part of the Knights of the Round Table. And I'm a huge nerd, and I can see that in your faces right now. Okay, well, anyway, so we're on top of this, what they call a mountain. And, but as I said before, it's really just a hilltop for any of us who live in Orting. Okay? And it's in order to see the entire cityscape of Edinburgh. And out from the trunk of the car, McConkey pulls out two very interesting contraptions. He calls them summer sledges, when in fact they are just the bottom of a grocery cart. The bit where you put the dog food on, and nothing else. Wheels, flat bit, that's it. I asked what they were for, and McConkey just threw one at me, put the other on the ground, and ran towards the side of the hill, pushing the summer sledge in front of him, and slammed his body on top of it as he disappeared down the ledge. A few things went through my mind at this moment. Things like, that is certainly not safe. And, aw yeah. And again, our mantra for the day, what are you doing with your life, pops into my head. In this instance, the question was asked, and it allowed me to see the opportunity before me as one I certainly did not want to miss out on. I mean, how many people could tell a story like that? And from the obvious little girl screams from McConkey, it seemed like a good time, or he had just died. So I went for it, and with much more manly screams than McConkey I might add. Sometimes this question needs to be asked to shake ourselves out of conformity, our monotony, the general ruts that life seems to get us in, and I guarantee you, life will get you in those ruts. You will need to ask this question to have some fun. This exact story has two applications, however, because with the rush of excitement that came from sledging down this hill also came an adrenaline-fueled brainstorming session as to how we could top that experience. The end result of this brainstorming session was a summer sledge being towed behind the car with two of us on it on the downhill portion of the National Park Road, taking corners at approximately 35 miles per hour. However, the grave oversight of these brainstorming sessions of not having a way to steer the summer sledge quickly came into play as we took a hairpin corner. With sparks flying behind us and the curb bringing the summer sledge to an abrupt stop, McConkey and I found our huddled form flying off the edge of Arthur's Seat. And in the slow motion world of life-endangering midair flight, as I attempted to cocoon my body around the gangly little girl screaming beanpole of a best friend, the question again reared its rather condescending head. What are you doing with your life? A concussed head, a dislocated shoulder, and extremely bruised ribs later, I realized that what are you doing with your life could not only break down inhibitions to doing extremely fun things, it should also act as an early warning system to doing extremely stupid things. And that brings us to the final story, which places a young Mr. Ruff in the middle of finishing his master's degree. He has received a phone call from a childhood friend. A friend who he shared a crib with at the age of 2, attended countless events with, went to high school with, spent summers with, went camping with, went on road trips with, lived the majority of life with, but sadly had fell into sporadic communication with for several years. Working full-time and being a student full-time, prioritizing career and calling to the point where relationships fell by the wayside because I couldn't be bothered to pick up a phone or connect on social media, had brought me to this shattering phone call. My friend had been in prison for the last 8 months on a minor narcotic charge. He was an addict. He was clean. He was getting out. And he was weeping on the phone to me about how he had not been a very good friend and wanted to reconnect. Aaron, man, what are you doing with your life? The question cut sharp and deep into my soul as I asked it of myself. Where were my priorities that I had not even realized that this has happened? Regardless of the compassion of friend or friendship that I still had for my friend, I would never get the opportunity to extend it to him in that time of need, and I would always know that I had failed him. And the reflection that what are you doing with your life forced on me, made me take a vow that I would make my very best effort to be there for the relationships in my life that are of utmost importance. 5 flavors of what are you doing with your life. My dad showed concern. I found my calling. It asked me to be daring. It exposed risk. And it brought about some much needed reflection. Concern, calling, daring, risk, reflection. I don't know which of these speaks to you the most today, and I don't know which of these will speak the most to you as you begin the next chapter of your life. But I do know that you will need to ask this question of yourself. You will need to ask it of others, and others will need to ask it of you. Don't get offended when they do. Don't shy away from it when you realize you need to ask it of yourself. And don't be a jerk when the time comes and you need to ask it of others. One thing I am certain of, if you are authentic in listening to this question or asking it of others, and you are sincere in asking it of yourself, your life will never be stagnant. It will be more exciting. It will elevate you as a person, and it will elevate those around you. Class of 2015. What are you doing with your life?